Welcome to this episode of Throttle Stop Garage. In episode 30, we're going to take a few of these, add a little bit of this, and see if we can actually get a driveline tunnel done. Okay, welcome to episode 30. Back again, trying to get this is this actually a driveline tunnel? The transmission tunnel is done. I kept calling it a driveline tunnel the other day, and I was laughing at myself in episode 29. So this is episode 30. We're going to get rocking and rolling now on the rest of the driveline tunnel, which means there's lots of sheet metal work going to go on in this one, folks. So I'd love to keep it light and entertaining, but it's sheet metal, so I don't know what's going to happen today. I hope it all works, but with sheet metal, one never knows. So you have to get a little bit creative with how you make these parts. Again, I don't have all the tools in the world, so I've got a shrinker and a stretcher and a little bit of know-how. I'm still really rather new to a lot of this stuff, so I'm learning as I go. But it's not my first rodeo either, so we'll see what we can get done here today. Or at least in this episode. It isn't going to be today. This is, gosh, I bet you this is going to be about 4 days worth of work in order to get this actually finished. All right, without any further ado, let's get the patterns. The patterns are already drawn up for parts of it, so that's good. Let's get it laid out on the sheet metal, and we're going to start working on it. So as we get going today, what we're going to do is we're first going to build that over hump part. Okay, so we needed to get this little reinforcing piece. It's 2 inches long. It's going to be 1 inch tall, so it's not nothing. I actually was working on an 1800, a Volvo 1800 over the weekend, and it has almost nothing over the hoop, which kind of made me wonder how much this actually goes on in that part. I mean, it's got floors holding it together and a bunch of other stuff, but I'd rather not risk it. I'm putting some stresses in places that I don't know a whole lot about, and I've got no method to figure parts of it out. So in this case, over-engineering it isn't going to hurt at all. Right, so I've worked out the pattern already. It's just simply following along the lines of the hoop, giving myself 1 inch over all of it, calculating some tabs for where things are going to weld on. It's the same part front and back. The hard part is I actually want it to look nice. And I don't even know why. Like, the seat sits over top of most of it, and only a little bit of it's ever going to get exposed. And I don't know why I worry about this sort of stuff, but I don't want it to look like I made it. I want it to look much, much better than that. So we're going to get rolling on it. We've got to turn a corner then. One of the ways that you can tell, like, sheet metal from people who care, from sheet metal from people who hack, is if you hack it together, you probably have taken a piece of 2-inch tube. This is 3 inches tall, so a piece of 3 inch by 2 would actually work, and I have lots. And you'd cut the general shape out of it. Heck, you'd probably be done the car by now, rather than explaining this to anyone. But what'll happen there is, for example, the cross member that I'm trying to join to is 2 inches wide. So where are you going to weld to? How are you going to make that happen? So this has to be a sheet metal thickness wider than 2 inches in order for that to be right. And then the other area that you can tell is usually the corner, which is why lots of guys use the box, like rectangular box section steel, because it has a nice corner, and it's difficult to make that. And it's not really that hard, but there's a lot of different methods by which you could make it. So this is the top. This is the top piece. This is the piece that's going to go over top of the whole thing. There's no way that I can make this out of a single piece of sheet. It just won't fold. Remember, I put that little kink in the middle of the hump, and that's going to bend, so that it just wasn't going to work out, people. So I decided to make it out of 3 pieces, pretty much that way. Now, if you're doing this in your home shop, you might just put those 2 pieces together, and you could just leave yourself an open corner to weld to, kind of like this, right? And then you could grind it off, and then you pray that you've got penetration there. And it's always going to look a little bit too sharp, and it's always going to look like you made it. So I don't want to do that. What I want to do is round the corner. So initially your brain thinks, well, we'll take this piece here, the flat piece that's going to join the top, and we're going to put the radius on this piece. But I think that's probably the wrong idea, because I couldn't figure out how to do it, because it has to curve. Right, so to get a single angle, like a right angle bend to curve, I can use my stretcher and shrinker and stretch and shrink the edge, and I can turn this into whatever shape you like. But when I have an edge on either side and it's quite narrow, so it's only 2 inches wide, that makes that really, really super difficult to do. It's not easy to do. I couldn't figure out how to do it. My shrinker and stretcher just won't allow it. I tried some test pieces. It's not going to work. Therefore, I'm going to put the curl on these flat pieces. So I'm just going to allow for a little bit of extra material here, and then I'm going to curl that over, and then I'm going to use that as a filler strip on the inside. We'll weld it up. You'll never know I did it. Okay, so enough talking. Let's get some drawing done. Okay, so now we're going to have to go in and we're going to use the tipping wheel on a bead roller with a skateboard wheel on the bottom. And the skateboard wheel allows us just to make an indentation in the metal, and then we're just going to tip and we're going to fold as we go. Now what's going to happen is we're actually going to take this piece of sheet and we're going to turn it into a bit of a pretzel because of the way that this flange has to actually get rolled in. And in order to make the flange not too sharp, because my tipping die is pretty sharp, I'm going to add a secondary line to this line right here. And I'm going to put it about there. It's about 1/8 of an inch off of the first line. I'm just going to carefully scribe this in. None of this is particularly accurate at this point. It doesn't really need to be. This outside edge follows the contour of the line, so this is going to be close enough. I'm not going to be able to follow this line, is what I'm trying to tell you. My bead roller is an early Eastwood one, and it's crappy. So I've reinforced it with some 2-inch tube on the back. I didn't spend any money on dies on this thing. This is a standard pulley. So this is just a 7/8 bore pulley that I bought at Princess Auto. And I just cut the pulley off the other side, so it's only got the one flange. It's flat, right, except for the big nut. If I really got excited about it, I'd put a flat screw in here and then be done with it. And the the rollerboard, what's that called? Skateboard. Cut. The skateboard wheel actually came from a friend of mine, so shout out to Greg. Thanks for the skateboard wheel. He's an avid skateboarder, even at his age, which we won't tell anyone about. So he's got lots of these wheels, so this whole setup cost about, oh gosh, if I'm into it, for $15, I'm surprised. So you can build these yourself, that's all I'm trying to say. Piece of cake. So we don't have to set the tension on the wheel super tight. We're going to try to do the 2-line thing. And I'm going to do it sort of in real time, just as we go. And I'm only wearing the gloves because sheet metal tends to shred your hands just a little bit if you don't get all the parts cleaned off of it. So a little zoom into the business end. Now I've put a mark on my screw at the top that gives me a rough indication of the adjustment. So I just move it down until it's touching the wheel. In that case, it's about towards the back of the machine. So I'm going to give it 2 full turns here just to start. I'm going to follow that outside line first. And again, I'm hand cranking here. I can't wait till I've got the money saved up to buy the new Eastwood kit. That will allow me to do this without having to kind of go crazy to get it done. Not that I'm going crazy to get this done. So right there, I'm about at the corner. So then I just turn. Okay, and I continue to tip. So I'm just pushing up. I'm not using as heavy a pressure as it sounds like. I'm just trying to move this stupid crank at the same time. Which, you know, if you're lazy and you're here to teach you about sheet metal, and you do this better than I do it, but you know, if you're throttle stop garage and you're just praying this works, this is what you got to work with, right? No fancy stuff here much. it is possible to follow this line with some accuracy. It's way better if someone else moves the crank. Trust me. There we go. So that's the first pass through. Okay, so you can already see we're getting some sort of puckering here at this top edge as we're folding it over. It needs to get smaller is what it needs. And I probably tipped a little too much at the start there. So we don't have to go quite so hard. We're just going to put a second run in here. Give it a little tip. It's a really effective way to make flanges on curved surfaces. So, oh, and if I was really smart, what I would have done is made another die with a bigger radius. And again, if you go into the Princess Auto or whatever your equivalent is, you can get a 7/8 bore hub for a sprocket, and buy a sprocket and a little bit of work with a grinder, and you can have yourself even a big enough like a big washer with a big enough bore can be used to do that. Super easy. So, you know, all those guys trying to sell you the super expensive dies, hey, I love them, but I've never used one, never needed to, can't afford it. It's the same with the English wheel stuff. You know, I guess if you've got $10,000, you can have a really nice wheeling machine, but you know, what happens if you only have a few $100 and a wife who doesn't want you spending money on this because, you know what, it's not my day job. This doesn't make a lot of sense. Okay, so that's 3 passes through the wheel. Starting to get a good tip going there. That's not so bad. So now I'm going to step down to that secondary line. So I'm going to start again holding it flat. I try to, if I'm really thinking about this, I'm not talking at the same time, I do try to start it so that my crank is in a position that I can pull it effectively to start. I don't want to start with my crank somewhere where I can't look at where the line is, because that gets to be a bit frustrating. So you put it in, you give it a little push up, again, doesn't have to be much, and I'm just 1/8 of an inch away, and I'm going to follow that line up. Now this is going to end up giving me a pretty nice radius all the way along. Crank it through. Okay. So initially it looks like I went off the line a little bit there because I couldn't see what I was doing. But as you go, again, you just tip a little, go, do it, just sneak up on it, just like all sheet metal, right? You don't run in and try to get it all at one time. You're going to just carefully go at it. What I'll do at the end is planish this out. There's the spot where I went over. You dirty beggar. I'll just planish this out on a T-dolly. Right? So just take a T-dolly and planish it out and knock that around a little bit, and that'll give me that real nice radius that I'm after. Okay, so I'll put that third pass now in on the bottom, and then I think what I'm going to do is we'll come back and show you this when she's all finished up. It's easier to follow the more times you put it through. So you can already see I've got there's a couple lines there to that radius. Okay, so that's done. So you can see there that we've got a pretty much a 90-degree angle, maybe a little over there at the start and the end. But we've also picked up, actually I have to zoom out here. you can also see that we've got ourselves a slightly illegal hockey stick here. Actually, that wouldn't be illegal. I wouldn't want to shoot with it though. All right, so we've got ourselves quite a bit of curve here. Again, all it means is we've got too much material on the flange. So if we shrink it, we're going to be able to straighten this flange out pretty effectively. So let's show you that. Okay, so here we are at the shrinker. Again, the shrinker's got a set of dies that just basically grabs and bunches the metal together. And if we look at the curvature, the metal is telling us what we need to know, which is it's reasonably consistent all the way along. Like it's a nice curve all the way along. There's no kink in it. So we just want to, well, it's a little bit straighter actually at the ends, but we just give it little pulls with the shrinker too. We're not going to go, don't go for broke and try to get it all straight in the first pull. It's just little bits here is going to pull this back straight. It doesn't need much at all, right? And if we have to do any more anywhere, it's probably through that center section, just a little bit. But we do want to be somewhat careful with it because we don't want to muck it up too much. So just a couple of shrinks and we're already getting close. Right, and quick eyeball check tells me I think I need to go a little bit more through the middle. I try to be pretty methodical with my shrinker, my stretcher, but as much as I say these things, there's many times where I've shrunk something and then had to come back and stretch it again. Okay, so we're now still a little curve, but the ends are really quite flat. So a couple more just really light shrinks, nothing, probably a little too much there. Just to try to pull it all. No, I got lucky. Put that one more in here. We're going to be awful close to taking it right back to where we want it. Reasonable. One more in here. Right at that corner there. Better to do less and do it many times than to do too much and have to undo it. Okay. So we're now down to, oh, like that works. Does that work? Try to get the camera right here. It's pretty flat. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Next up, now we've got this corner turned. We can take it over to the T-dolly and just tune it up a little bit. You can see the radius is actually pretty nice here, but I just want to make sure it's really nice and consistent. So I'm just going to take it to the T-dolly with the soft urethane hammer and just knock that out nicely. We've got too much material here at the top edge, so I don't need all of this, nor is it particularly flat. Like I just kind of guesstimated where this all would be. Right, in terms of the height of the ridge here, or the flange. So now I can take that flange and actually come in and cut some of it off and straighten it out. In fact, as I look at the flange, it's tightened up a bit. No longer quite as square as it used to be. So there's a little bit of magic left to go on this one. But we're right now with these with the panels with the flanges tipped on them, we are going to actually, there's a little bit of a line that you can see. I'll just see if we can catch a close-up of it. It probably won't focus on it very well, but ever so slightly. It's just that it's not perfectly consistent all the way along. It's not really all that hard to tune out of any of this stuff. We're just going to use, again, the urethane mallet. And in this case, I don't have a die with a small enough radius, so what I have is a bricklaying chisel that I've just rounded over the edge of. I use these all the time. You get them for super cheap, and they actually work really well as dies to do this. So I'm just going to zoom in. You're hitting. And we'll just make this more consistent. So you just sort of feel your way along, and then I've just hit the spot there where the curve changes, so I can't really go any further there. And I've got a little spot here where the wheel went, the wheel didn't go offline. I put the wheel offline. I'll show you how to fix that in a sec. It's not that hard. There's this next area in here. We're just tapping it around for consistency is all. I am aware that this actually goes underneath the seat. You have your crazinesses, I have mine. We don't judge here. Okay, so this is a dolly I actually made out of a part of a railway tie. This is the clamp for the side of the tie. And they just throw this stuff away. It just sits out by the side of the tracks. It's good forged steel. Like, it rings like a bell. It's hard. You know, it's just great for making dollies. Lots of nice curved shapes. And free. So my wife did think I was a little crazy when I told her to stop the car, and I jumped out and picked this stuff up. So, but it has a nice curve right here that's just about perfect. Now, I've just got the face on this hammer is not perfectly flat. There's a bit of a crown to it, just a little bit. And I almost never use a perfectly flat hammer. So perfectly flat hammers have a bad habit of leaving dings, and I don't do this all day, so I'm not that good at it. But what we're going to do is just slide it over, and then carefully, again, we're not trying to get it all in one go, and we're not trying to stretch it. So we're technically off dolly here. And we're just trying to move that metal back to have it be nice and flat. In fact, the hammer now, I'm sure it won't show up, but the hammer marks are leaving just the faintest line right in here, right where it needs to go out. So it's telling you what, you know, if it's not leaving a line, you're probably stretching, and we don't need to stretch it. So just need to carefully come in, tap it back. Index finger on the back of the hammer, just for control. I don't want to hit this too hard. I'm not driving a nail. I'm just tapping on sheet metal. I'm done when the metal here that I'm straightening is level with the radius of that curve. So in this case, we're going to call that good enough for this particular job. And then because we've sort of worked that edge a little bit, we just need to come in and tune this edge. Really no big deal. There you have it. The cross member part, the over part anyways, is finished up now. So I've just taken a minute and sanded the rest of that off just to get it nice and flat. You would not know that was made out of several pieces unless I showed you the inside of it. So just gently tapping and playing with it as I was doing that final polish. Just picked it up, all the little dents, got the areas folded over here, and then finished out the back sides. So that looks like something without the tab hanging down. Just got the little returns put in there, so that's ready to fit. Now in the meantime, I've rescued the back seat from the from the rafters. Here we go, and I've taken the opportunity to mark off the space that I need to cut out on this seat. I just taken a Sharpie and popped it in there, so you can see I've got a little bit more to do, but not too outrageous, so that's going to be easily done just with a jigsaw. That's not a problem. Simple plywood seat. No reason to change that up. Hey, it's a composite. There's the cross member part, and I haven't even ground the sides off yet, so I will have to do that. And you can see that just snaps into place, tucks right in just as you like. Then this other back sheet metal part goes in just like so. You can see that. Again, we still have to pull that down a little bit, but it's no big deal. It'll go. It's been down with Tech screws, so it'll go down with a little bit of force. So I've got all of that ready to go, so that's just going to sit there for the next little bit while we work on getting the tunnel in place. So that's next up, is finally getting the tunnel built. Alright, so next up is going to be the piece that goes from the transmission tunnel back to this cross member part. So now that that's in place, I can take that 1/4-inch wire that I've got there and start mocking up some pieces. So I don't think this, I never think these back pieces are going to take very long. They always take way too long. But I'll get something knocked out here first and then probably finish the rest of it up tomorrow. As long as I have a rough form today, I'm going to be a happy camper. So, and then, geez, I still got to find the floors, don't I? I better go find the floors in my attic. Hold on a minute. Okay, so that has the transmission tunnel receiving part basically done. Well, that's the doghouse for it finished up. So you can see there, that's the Slip yoke fits in, lots of clearance. Again, there's going to be a little bigger slip yoke in there. I've got the angle of this tilted at basically the same angle as the engine down. So if we carry on from there back to here and create the rest of that tunnel, we are going to have this part stitched up. So first, we'll take some of this wire, some of this 1/4-inch wire that I have. We'll cut it down and we'll start building a quickie kind of template to see if that works. We're a little wider at the back than we are at the front. Again, the drive line comes over at a bit of an angle, so that's why I did that. And I want to make sure, so I dug my seat brackets out because the seat has to go in, and I know I'm going to need some clearance there. So I might have to go and actually fetch the seats at some point before I go too much further. But we'll see how it goes. All right. Well, I think that's the end of another weekend, and I hope we're making a little bit of good progress right now. So I'm feeling pretty good about it. But what you would have just seen me do is shrink that pattern. I'd put that 1/4-inch wire up on top of the two parts that I have to meet with the sheet metal, and to get that to work properly, you've got to then take a 1/4-inch out, right? Once you build a pattern around it. So I just set it on the table. I measured out a 1/4-inch. I mean, the fit's not always going to be perfect, but what you go for is you just try to tune it every step. Just tune it every step of the way. Just further improve the pattern. Again, the more accurate you make those patterns, the better your sheet metal is going to be in the end. So we've got a pretty good line on the sheet metal now. And I actually have enough to finish it. I was the whole time I was sitting there economizing on my last little bit of 18 gauge because I don't want to blow it off and have to go back to my sheet metal supplier. But I'm pretty happy with the way things have turned out so far. So you can see that's having lost the 1/4-inch. It's now sitting right down on the areas where it needs to sit. And there's the little jogs and things. Now there's some little puckers in this stuff, and this is the RAM board, right? Everyone uses this RAM board. I remember when you used to be able to buy it in sheets that were flat. This rolled stuff is just, yeah, okay, it's the best you can do for this kind of cardboard, but I'm probably going to start looking for a supplier that can get me sheets that are actually flat. So on this side, I'm working with it being, it's concave on this side, convex on the other side, convex over the top. How much of that am I going to add? Well, I'm going to do the big radius again here on the corners, and I'll start bleeding a radius in towards the back. So I don't mind it being flattish at the top, and it can bleed a radius towards the back. Mostly because you're going to see the back. I probably won't be dragging. I mean, it'll probably be upholstered, but I'm not going to be dragging. There's going to be a console over the rest of this. I'm not going to be dragging that all the way back to the back. So. There is no provision for rear seat heat in the upcoming car. I don't even care. I'm not riding in the rear seat ever. I don't think anyway. So yeah. So anyways, I'm pretty pleased with that. I think we can go ahead now and start bashing the sheet metal. Still not 100% convinced that I'm knowing what I'm doing when I'm going to make this big radius, but I've done it once before, so we'll see if that actually works out. Dabbling, and that's when my brain tells me that it's pretty much finished. So thanks for continuing to tune in. I'm sure I'm going to cut this last part. Under the subject of spoken too soon, despite all the care and attention I was paying to try to use as little out of this sheet as I could, You can see, oh, we just missed it. It's literally the flange width. That's how much I missed it by. Anyway, I had to go and buy all new sheets of 18 gauge. So 2 new 4 foot by 3 foot pieces.